True Colours. Who is the real Dr. Umar al-Quadri? In light of the Muslim cleric's claims of being the victim of a hate crime, it is worth examining comments he made following the Sligo murders carried out by Muslim Yusuf Palani. In 2023, Palani was sentenced for torturing, castrating and beheading gay men Aidan Moffat and Michael Snee. The murders happened in 2022. He also, lest we forget, stabbed a third gay man, Anthony Burke, in the eye and had a list of several other intended victims. Following the sentencing in 2023, Umar al-Quadri said, "If these attacks had been religiously motivated, then there would have been more than this one isolated case. It's as simple as that." It would appear that al-Quadri's threshold for evidence regarding religiously motivated hate crimes is quite high. At least it was in this case. It wasn't enough for him that Palani visited his mosque immediately after the murders. His modus operandi was the hallmark of Islamic extremist terrorism, that is, beheading. When speaking to detectives, he spoke about how it is forbidden to be gay in his religion. He had planned several more murders of gay men, and he suspiciously had upwards of 350 to 400,000 euro in his home. Was it possible this was terrorist funding? After all, what 23-year-old has that kind of cash? Conveniently, none of these points I have just made indicate to al-Quadri that Palani could have been driven by religiously motivated hate. On the other hand, he claims, without any corroborating evidence, that he is the victim of a hate crime. He says he arranged to meet two Irish men, and next thing he knows, he has lost consciousness, and he wakes up in his car with no recollection of having been attacked, despite alleged injuries. He originally claimed that the man who he spoke to on the phone said he was Pakistani Irish. It's possible, of course, to have no recollection of such an incident, although you would kind of expect that someone may have a concussion or a worse injury if they can't remember anything. But let's say he doesn't remember, then no recollection means he does not have any proof that this was a hate crime. He does not know the motivation. He does not recall his attacker saying anything at all. But the media are acting as though it was categorically a hate crime. No questions asked. There has been far more outrage about what has happened to him. Yet, what, aside from Palani's barbaric acts, could be more of a hate crime than stabbing 5-year-olds with a 14-inch knife and the intent to kill them? Of course, the media tried in vain to pin that crime on the Irish by lamely pointing out that Bushacre was an Irish citizen, as though having a piece of paper stating such meant his past, his religion, and his country of origin could all be discounted entirely. The media and the other usual suspects also had previously tried to blame Palani's crimes on the Irish, labelling the Irish in general as homophobic, even though we were the first country in the world to vote in favour of gay marriage. They also overlooked the fact that, until Palani, no gay man had ever been beheaded in Ireland for his sexuality. All of this was ignored. One radical leftist professor even publicly accused Irish women of being responsible for Palani's crimes. She stated feminists who believed in biology over trans identity were to blame. That's how mental this country is, and how much dangerous Marxists are detached from reality. Anyhow, moving back to the Parnell Square incident for a moment, al-Quadri himself was quick to condemn rioters' actions, deeming them to be hateful towards migrants, but insofar as I can tell, he did not condemn Riyad Bushacre, and interestingly, in regard to his own alleged attack, al-Quadri is at pains to point out that his attackers were fully Irish. Some may think this is fine for him to say, but would perhaps change their view on that if they visited his Twitter page, whereupon they will see he has a quote on his background image which reads, "It is not blood that makes you Irish, but a willingness to be part of the Irish nation." It appears al-Quadri wants migrants to be seen as fully Irish, except when a crime is committed. That is when the Irish are suddenly seen to be distinctly separate to migrants. Of course, the media will not be questioning any of this, nor the interesting and enlightening disparity between his assessment of Palani's motivations and those of his own alleged attackers. He is very selective about what constitutes a crime driven by religious ideology or hatred of religion, and predictably NGOs and the radical left have joined forces with al-Quadri, coming out in defence of the Muslim cleric and Muslims in general, despite holes in his story. For example, he states it must have been a hate crime because he was not robbed. In the Irish Examiner, it is reported that Al-Qadri reiterated his belief that the attackers did not want to rob him, saying they didn't take his phone, watch or car. However, in the next sentence, the article states, Gardaí confirmed they are investigating a robbery and assault that occurred in Tala on Thursday evening. The article was printed at 12:35 p.m. on February 16th. Later on that day, at 5:19 p.m, Al-Qadri would post that he was in fact robbed of his wallet, and in doing so casts doubt on his original claim that no robbery meant that there was a hate motive. It is also odd that he would post this at all, given that earlier that day at exactly 10:23 a.m, he asserted on Twitter that the crime was definitely motivated by hate, as the attackers, quote, did not want to rob me. Why did he later change his story? Was he initially trying to hide the fact that he was robbed, but realised he had to add in this part of the story after he noted the Irish Examiner reported that the Gardaí were, in fact, investigating a robbery as well as an assault? Then there's the fact that he claims he was meeting the two men in order to sign a marriage certificate for a wedding that was taking place that evening. He says when he rang the men he was supposed to meet, they told him to go to a different location in a housing estate and wait in his car. Did Al-Qadri not find it odd that families celebrating a marriage would not invite this esteemed Muslim imam into the house to celebrate with them and sign the certificate indoors, rather than ask him to sit in his car? Surely that would be a clear warning that something was not right, and yet he followed their instructions. That seems strange. Something about this aspect of the story doesn't add up. I, as a non-Muslim Irish person, was not aware that Muslim marriage certificates are signed by imams for strangers in such a casual way. Why would I be aware, of course? But also by extension of that, how would any other non-Muslim Irish people be aware and then use this to form the basis of their trap? Is it possible that there is any involvement from Muslims in this attack? After all, Al-Qadri has proved unpopular with some of his own people in the past for appearing to openly support the LGBT movement. But in any case, it seems an odd practice for an imam to sign a marriage certificate for people he has previously never met in person. I wouldn't have thought signing one at night time in a dark housing estate on the eve of the wedding itself was appropriate. It all seems very cloak and dagger. Why would he not invite the husband and bride to his mosque to meet them and sign the marriage certificate there? Dr. Al-Qadri was clearly signing a marriage certificate without having met the female who was to become a wife. This seems rather irresponsible given that, unfortunately, within Islam, there is a tendency for marriages that are underage and forced, and this is absolutely happening to young underage Muslim girls in this country. Virgin Media described Al-Qadri as one of the most prominent Muslim voices within Ireland, and that sentence alone should give Irish people pause for thought, insofar as it indicates that this predominantly Catholic country is changing. But that sentence also reinforces his level of importance within the Muslim community. So again I ask, why is he signing marriage certificates outside in the dark for people he doesn't actually know at all? This is certainly not how non-Muslim legal marriage certificates are obtained in Ireland, that's for sure. But all of this is overlooked in favour of the hate crime narrative, and despite glaring inconsistencies and obvious question marks, Government Quango Lakela, who say they promote diversity, not division, but in my opinion only seem to support division, and who presume to speak on behalf of the Tala community, are supporting the hate crime claim, calling for a vigil on Monday the 19th of February at 6 p.m. And they tweeted, "We must stand together against the racist attack in Tala of Dr. Umar Al-Qadri, chair of the Irish Muslim Council. Tala is a welcoming, diverse community. The far right want to divide us on race and religion using fear." This tweet has so far received little traction, but has been liked by the Trans and Intersex Pride Dublin group. And yet they didn't repost it. Or at least, the last time I checked, they hadn't. Why not? After all, didn't Al-Qadri stand in solidarity with the LGBT community following the Sligo murders? He stated in April 2022 that the murders serve as a reminder that we have much to do at home and around the world to tackle the dehumanisation of LGBTQI+ people. We are all too aware that homophobia remains too common in certain Islamic centres and schools of thought throughout the Muslim world and here in Ireland. But of course, Muslims are allowed to lie to Kafirs, and it seems that support for the LGBT community was poppycock because in August 2022, his tune had changed drastically. And this was just a few months after the murders of the men in Sligo. Unfortunately for Al-Qadri, a speech he made at his mosque appeared online after a gay Muslim posted it. Referring to being homosexual, he stated, "You cannot force me to believe this lifestyle is right. In my view, according to Islam, it contradicts the Quran. You like someone from the same gender? Maybe that's natural. But in Islam, it strictly forbids from engaging in physical sexual activity with the same gender. It's as simple as that." He seems to like using that phrase, I've noticed. Muslim Yusuf Murray also posted group WhatsApp conversations he had with Al-Qadri. In one message he states how Allah is the best of planners, and finished his message by writing Allahu Akbar. He was replying to a message someone had posted which reported that gay men were catching monkeypox, and he said that this should be, quote, an eye-opener to those who spread campaigns that go against nature. Al-Qadri did not deny the messages could have been posted by him, and said he would not condemn the content, insisting the content was not homophobic. Furthermore, he has openly stood by his views contained within his speech. The reality is, openly trans and gay people would be at risk of being stoned or thrown off tall buildings in many Islamic countries, and yet Paul Murphy, People Before Profit, Lekela, and other supporters of diversity are openly supporting someone who is not in support of diversity and has made some deeply homophobic remarks, which he stands by. He has previously publicly lied about supporting gay people. Why trust somebody who has deliberately misled people, possibly with the ulterior motive of raising his profile or that of the Muslim community? And if it was a Catholic priest who had made such remarks or alleged that they were the victim of a hate crime, would they stand in solidarity then? Hardly. As for Al-Qadri, we do not know for sure what happened to him. He himself cannot be sure despite what he claims. Not enough evidence has been presented to ascertain any motive. He says he has injuries and has received hospital treatment. But regardless of whatever alleged injuries there are, there's no discernible evidence of a hate crime. If there was, he would have provided it with gusto. And I'm also quite surprised here that he hasn't provided a picture of his injuries. Also, isn't it odd to be speaking so openly about an ongoing Garda investigation? This all seems very timely in light of the push for new hate speech legislation. Lastly, just to say, I've met Dr. Umar Al-Qadri in 2015. He comes across as superficially charming, well-spoken, mannerly and very polished. And it was an odd experience, because after just a few minutes of speaking to him, he invited me to go away on a trip to Calais to visit a refugee camp. I would have been the only female in the back of a van on a long boat trip in what was an otherwise men-only venture, seemingly not suitable for Muslim women. There, of course, could have been many innocent reasons why I was asked to go, and you can make of it what you will. But safe to say, I politely declined this rather inappropriate offer, and I thought it was a really strange thing to ask me to do. Having listened to all of this, what do you make of Umar Al-Qadri?